Hello everyone. In this session, we will understand how the recording and playback works. So we'll understand this with the help of a diagram, and in our next session, we will understand this with hands-on. So here we have taken an example of a production API, that is the real API, which is already available, and this is the client system, right? That is making call. Suppose it can be a consumer, it can be any other middleware that is making call to the real API. An API gateway is nothing. It just routes the call from the client to the real API. So why API gateway is being used here is because I am trying to set the production like context here, because there can be multiple APIs. Might be we can have customer API, we can have cards API, right? We can have cards API, we can have customer API. So it will route the, according to the algorithm set in the API gateway, it will route the transactions flowing from here to the API which is required to be called. So here we are concerned only about this any hypothetical API, suppose the real production API, right? So this is how the things work in production system. Now how recording will take place in this kind of environment. So now that's how it will look like, how the architecture or how the things will look like. The request will flow from here to the API gateway, and API gateway will now, it will not call to the real API directly. However, now it will go through the WireMock. That's why it is called like WireMock will act as a proxy, because all the requests which will be flowing from client to the real API will now first go to the WireMock, and WireMock will pass the request to the real API. Within this process, WireMock will record all those transactions in the form of mappings. These mappings will be stored, which WireMock will be used in future as a reference when real API is not available, right? So that's how it works. So how API gateway will point to the WireMock, how our client will point to the WireMock, this we will understand in our hands-on. So that's how the playback works. Now what will happen is, when the real API is not available, so a real API either it's not available, or might be there might be any other constraints like the cost parameters are quite high. So that's why we are using API mocking here, right? Or you want to test few components which are still not available. So in that case, now what will happen is, request will flow from here to the API gateway, and now it will go to the WireMock directly. A real API will not play any picture now, right? So it will look into the mappings. Do I have the mapping? Do we have the transaction which is coming from the client or from the API gateway? If yes, it will respond back with that response to that particular transaction, right? So there can be a number of transactions, there can be a number of rules defined. So accordingly you will get to understand this in our advanced session, where we will discuss how we do that in WireMock, right? So I think so the record and playback concept is now clear. So next we will do a hands-on using any of the real API available free of cost, so that you can all do hands-on on your own and have quite a good understanding on this. Thank you.